Alexas have been doing very, very well, very successful. They were very successful for us, but also very successful for the cameramen, for the crew using them. In fact, the last 3 years, the best cinematography Oscar and the best visual effects Oscar has gone to movies shot with Alexa. Now, while we do understand that it is the filmmakers who actually made those movies, we can't help but be a little bit proud that our tools are the ones that got them there. The latest incarnation, the Alexa XT, that you can see here, is also very popular. And the reason's the same reason the Alexa is so popular. It's best overall image quality and best overall production cost. That's really what got that camera into the market, and I think what's going to keep it there for quite a while. The Alexa XT has in-camera ARRI RAW up to 120 frames a second. And after the introduction of the Alexa, we've actually seen quite a strong increase in ARRI RAW footage. A lot more feature films love to shoot ARRI RAW, but we're also seeing commercials shoot ARRI RAW, and we're seeing television series shoot some scenes, the visual effects scenes, for instance, with ARRI RAW. Now, as you will see, the Alexa is a fantastic tool no matter what your recording resolution, no matter what your delivery resolution, and no matter what your delivery medium. Now, we'll be talking about that a little bit more. One of the guys who's been using the Alexa XT is this guy, Roger Deakins. He shot Unbroken with the Alexa XT. That's directed by Angelina Jolie. There's a lovely article in the ARRI News about that. You should look in there. My favorite bit is that he really loves the in-camera full spectrum neutral density filters, because I think that's an underused, really, really useful bit of the Alexa XT cameras. Next show, Sicario. Roger also used... We've got some elevator music going on here. Oh, that's me. Okay, stop this. Do you know that the alarm clock is still on when you put this on silent? I didn't. Okay. Sicario. He used ARRI RAW OpenGate and was very happy with that as well. Now, Alexa also has the widest exposure latitude of any of the digital cameras out there, still does, and I think that's really going to be helpful once we're going to see high dynamic range display hit the markets. There's a lot of discussions right now about UHD, but there's also a lot of discussions about high dynamic range displays. If you have some time, come to the ARRI booth. We have an example of a Dolby Vision HDR display right next to a regular dynamic range display. Both are HD, but you can see what a huge different impact it makes if you have a higher dynamic range. Now, Alexa images having the high dynamic range to begin with, they're prepared for anything that'll happen. Now, we also have some news on the Alexa. We recently, I always talk to customers. I love to talk to customers. Cameramen turn out to be really, really interesting people, cameramen and camerawomen, and so I lead a very interesting life. And I visited the Game of Thrones people. I loved it. I sat on the actual throne. That was perfect. My son was so jealous. And we talked with them, and they said, you know what? We'd actually like to have a codec that has a higher data rate than ProRes 4x4. And we talked with Apple. They had been thinking about the same thing. And a while later, Apple came out with a new ProRes codec, which is ProRes 4x4 XQ. ProRes 4x4 XQ has 1.5 times the data rate of ProRes 4x4. And if you take a look at this chart here, we've charted the noise floor that you get with any kind of codec on the blue line, and the data rate are the green bars. Now on the very left, you have uncompressed video, and that has a very high data rate, but very low noise floor. Of course, that makes sense. And then right next to it is ProRes 4x4 HQ. For a significant decrease in data rate, you actually get very, very little gain in the noise floor. So it's positioned right between ProRes 4x4 and uncompressed video. Now, what would you use that for? ProRes 4x4 is a beautiful codec. It did really, really well. Everybody loves it. In fact, most of the productions are done with 4x4. But if you want to do a scene where you need to really, really dig into the colors, where you do some extreme color grading, if you need to do day for night, if you're going to do some dream sequences, or always a popular one, if you have a bland gray sky and you're trying to make it look like it's blue and you're really trying to get the most of those 3-4 code values you have there, that's when ProRes 4x4 XQ really, really comes into its own. There's just a little bit more meat on the bones with ProRes 4x4 XQ. Now, this will actually be available at the end of the month with Software Upgrade 10 for the Alexa. Whenever we do anything, we like to look at images. I used to start out trying to do the math and what would be the best upscale factor, and I gave all that stuff up by now because you need to look at the images. Rodney Charters once said, it's not a science project. We're doing images, this is entertainment. If it looks good on the screen, it's good, no matter what the theoretical pixel math said. In order to put it to the point, we have actually shot some footage with ProRes 4x4 XQ, and we've done this as a little experiment. This is a unique little trailer. First of all, we found a crazy guy who likes to ride up the Alps on a unicycle, and then he unpacks from his backpack a parachute, and he goes down with the parachute, with the unicycle strapped to his butt. Very, very strange. Once we had all that footage, we went into post and we said, let's see what we can do with this. Let's see how far we can push the image. So the grading here will be a little strange. We popped the colors, we cranked everything essentially to 11. There's more color in there, there's a little more contrast in there than we would do to make a normal pretty image. And it was amazing, we simply could not break the image, which is one of the great advantages of ProRes 4x4 XQ. So let's look at the unicycle guy. We'll be offering classes in that later on. That was the unicycle. So that was about the compression ratio. How much can you compress the image? But we also have some more news on ProRes, which is probably the most popular used codec on the Alexa, and that is we're offering a new resolution for ProRes, which is ProRes 3.2K. That will be available beginning of next year, and you may ask, well, why are they doing this? The reason is as follows. As far as I see it, there are 4 things our customers want to do these days. They want to shoot high definition HD for television, they want to shoot 2K features, they want to shoot UHD for television, and they want to shoot for a 4K feature delivery. Now for high definition, we have a solution in the Alexa. You can shoot ProRes HD or DNX HD. For 2K features, we have a solution. You can shoot ProRes 2K or Arri RAW. And for 4K features, we have a solution. Shoot Arri RAW, do an upscale in post, Arri RAW 16:9, 4:3, or Open Gate, which has become more and more popular these days. The one delivery format where we didn't really have a deal solution is UHD television. And so we looked very hard at what we can do with the existing Alexa. And first we thought, well, they can just shoot Arri RAW Open Gate. Well, that works out in terms of resolution, image quality. It's just most television series don't have the money for Arri RAW, even though I've recently heard of 2 television series in the UK who actually are shooting Arri RAW. I'm pretty impressed. But that I think is probably too much data for a television series. So we said, well, the next thing we can do is we can do a ProRes 3.2K. We're taking 3.2K from the sensor, and in the camera, we're not doing any upscaling, no downscaling, we're recording ProRes 3.2K, and then in post, you can do an upscale from the 3.2K to 3.8K, which is UHD. Most Alexa shows have post anyway, so that makes a lot of sense. As I said, that will be available in the beginning of next year, and I think that'll make Alexa even more future-proof. I think we have a solution for any kind of delivery format now with the Alexa, be that HD 2K, UHD 4K, or high dynamic range displays. And as I said earlier, we always like to shoot tests. So also with ProRes 3.2K, we have a test here. This is 3.2K images uprest to UHD. And this is kind of something different. You can tell the guys were getting bored with all the bang, bang, boom, boom trailers. So they tried something a little different, a little more socialist Bauhaus in flavor. So if we can please run the next trailer. Now, it's interesting, the whole idea for the ProRes 3.2K came kind of together at NAB. We always talked to a lot of the customers, and Game of Thrones, the guys from Game of Thrones came to us and said, you know, wouldn't it be cool if you could record ProRes 2.8K in camera? And I said, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And at the same time, we had Michael Cioni, who is the CEO and digital post supervisor at LightIron, and he had come up with a very similar idea. In fact, I think he's the first one who came up with the conceptual underpinnings of this whole idea. And to talk a little bit more about this, I'd like to ask Michael Cioni to come on stage now.
Thanks for coming today. This is pretty exciting because if you know me, I really like to have as much pixels to work with as possible. That's the type of thing I do. I actually do about 40 to 50 features a year, and about half of those are 4K in nature. So I'm really, really big on having a lot of pixels to work with. And what was great in collaborating with Ari and Mark and the team was to be able to come up with a solution that had 4K outputs and 4K solutions that would work. And about a year ago, we started seeing how the Alexa XT gave us an opportunity to get closer to this UHD world. Now, if you think about this in terms of megapixels, if you're an Alexa ProRes customer, you're basically used to working with 2.2 megapixels in actual space. And that's the images that so many of us are used to seeing. In fact, my estimation is that greater than 80% of Alexa footage seen is actually living inside this 2.2 megapixel world. We've seen what that can do. For a lot of people, they are able to get into the Airy Raw world, which this gets them a little bit closer into this area. But we see this 8 megapixel world of Ultra HD. And if we're going to try to figure out what to do there, we have to sort of solve a little bit of these problems. And this is where ProRes 3K comes into play. As we now see in terms of the current format of ProRes 2.2K, if you're an Alexa ProRes customer, if you use ProRes as part of your workflow for post-production, if you use ProRes as part of your workflow for production, now you're able to get into 3168. So you're actually over the 5 megapixel mark in terms of maintaining a ProRes world. So this is a huge, huge change for the ProRes customers. And if you add on the XQ factor of ProRes, you're not only improving the megapixel count, you're also improving the signal-to-noise ratio, as Mark showed in his bar graph, that actually it's a quieter picture. So this is actually going to make things a lot more higher quality for the ProRes customers. But while we're able to take that information, we can also apply it to Airy Raw. With the OpenGate Airy Raw, we move into 7.5 megapixels of image quality, and this is a massive increase. In fact, it's actually 90% the resolution of actual UHD. So we're almost all the way to a native UHD photography in terms of working with Alexa. So a lot of people are going to see at this point, well, Michael, that's not actual UHD. We still have to go through some sort of process at some point. And the way I look at this is not to see what I'm missing, but actually what I'm gaining. I think that's a fair way to look at that, because this is actually a bridge, because we're actually bridging from the ProRes 2.2 megapixels into the ProRes 3K into Ultra HD. If you look at the bridge here, we're able to have a 145% increase in resolution for ProRes customers. That's what it boils down to in terms of megapixels. So a lot of people are going to say, well, this isn't full 4K. I understand that. What I'm trying to say is that 5.4 megapixels is a whole lot more than 2.2 megapixels. So for people that are already satisfied with the huge percentage of ProRes 2K product out there, this is actually giving you nearly 150% more information to work with, which is going to improve scaling, zooming, repositioning, and just overall image fidelity into UHD platforms. So 145% is not something to kind of just stumble over. That's a huge upgrade, and this is something that to the customer, you can still use your current Alexa XT models, and so it doesn't even require a new camera. This is part of the Alexa development protocol. So that's excellent. But in our Airy Raw world, this is also a big improvement, because we're looking at a 60% increase when we look at Airy Raw. So for those of you, and I actually am a huge fan of Airy Raw in terms of total image quality, and Airy Raw does offer some of the things that ProRes doesn't. So I don't want to count ProRes out, because 145% improvement is really, really valuable. But when we look at Airy Raw, we have a 60% improvement in picture. And so that's a lot of pixels. In fact, we're actually at the 7.5 megapixel area. And so where that kind of brings us next is how we want to put this into a practical example. And the way this works is, this is a film that I'm going to have the permission from Lionsgate to actually show a little bit of a scene. And the reason this is important is because this is a film, it actually comes out in about a month. And this is a film that was shot Airy Raw by DP Jonathan Sella. And this was Airy Raw 4:3, fully anamorphic. And unlike a lot of the anamorphic workflows that people use, we actually want to deploy a native digital intermediate in this, which means we actually keep every single pixel that the camera photographs in the DI. By doing that, the DI actually gains a huge amount of vertical resolution, because we are used to actually cropping things down for widescreen. In fact, if you do a standard 2K DI, get these numbers right, a standard 2K DI in widescreen, you're only going to have about 856 vertical lines of resolution. That's like 720p. That's pretty low res when it comes to widescreen pictures in 2K, because we have to crop. But in terms of anamorphic, because the 4:3 sensor is taller, we're able to maintain that vertical resolution. When we de-squeeze that, we get a lot more image. In fact, we get 6.2 megapixels at the source, so that's how much the actual 4:3 sensor is capturing. And then we get 5.5 megapixels that are actually distributable, that are active pixels that we can use once we de-squeeze everything. And a scope DCP is going to be 7 megapixels. So we're a little over 80% of the scope DCP. Now, in terms of an anamorphic picture, that's really what you want. And that's what I'm going to show you now. The image that we're going to look at, and we don't want you taking any pictures or video of this clip. What I want you to look for is not what is not there. Sometimes people say, well, this isn't 4K. You're actually going to see this in 4K. But what I want you to understand is when you're looking at an anamorphic picture in a digital world, we typically have less pixels on the screen. That's the normal way, because digital does not have anamorphic projection. We don't have that like we did in film. So we actually lose a lot of resolution when doing digital projection widescreen. But if you actually shoot on the Alexa anamorphic and you do a full anamorphic DI, an actual 4:3 DI, you can then de-squeeze that. People sometimes say, people look too sharp in 4K. Well, you're going to see not sharpness, you're going to see texture. And you're going to see eyeballs in a close-up of an older actor that looks fantastic. You're not going to feel that it looks too sharp. You're also going to see the absolute anamorphic artifacting of the light streaks. You're going to see that, which was all optically done in this picture. And then you also should look for the dynamic between warm and cold colors, bright and dark. This clip that I chose basically puts together very high dynamic range. It puts together two different very unique lighting setups that are contrasted together. It puts up very wide and very close images together. It shows you depth of field in terms of the optics of the anamorphic, hawks in this case. And then it also shows you color correction that also puts this together, that shows quite a bit of dynamic imagery. So to conclude with this, when you look for anamorphic and you want to put images on a big screen, and a 65-foot screen like this is where the megapixel count actually matters. So many of us, I included, we often evaluate image quality at 1080p. Why? Because none of us have this screen in our house, okay? So we make decisions based on what is available to us, and what is most available in a camera rental house or a prep floor or even on the set or the cutting room is a 1080p display. That is not the ideal place to make evaluations, because 1080p is the great equalizer. Everything looks great in 1080p. But when you get to 65 feet, you're starting to see that a larger sensor will actually go further in making the picture stay just as clear at 65 feet as it does at 1080p. And in anamorphic, this is a key to do that. So let's take a look at the clip from John Wick.